This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 1, Episode 6, Impractical Applications. In this episode, our friends are forced to be honest with one another, which it turns out is really often very unpleasant and terrifying, but freeing, it seems. And there's a sequence with Julia that's one of the most gruesome things I've ever seen on television, and it was really, really terrifying. It's so scary, y'all. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So first of all, I want to thank Nicole, who is the one who commissioned this episode. So thank you very much. It's been bouncing between Nicole and Jesse most of the time right now. I know some others have been commissioning in the future. And yeah, this episode is finally starting to get into a little bit more character stuff, which is what I always crave. And I'm always also a big fan of people having to tell each other the truth about things, especially when it's something that they may not actually have admitted to themselves. I am a little bit confused as to the conclusions that Quentin came to about himself. I don't really get it yet, but we'll get to that and talk about it. And maybe some of you in the chat will have some suggestions to me as to why that feels true to you about him or not, perhaps. But all right, so let's start this off, because this episode, we get a lot of like new information about Katie, especially, and what happened with her. And I found it really interesting because Katie is probably the character that I felt like least connection with out of everybody. I disliked Penny the most, but Katie just kind of felt like nothing. You know, she was one of those characters that if she disappeared off the show, I probably wouldn't notice for like 4 episodes, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, that girl, what happened to her? So I appreciate that they've sort of like gotten something going with her, because now I feel a lot more invested. So we start off right where we ended with the previous episode, where Quentin is realizing that Penny went to Fillory. And Penny has the kind of reaction that somebody would have if they had some weird vision and you told them they went to Narnia, which is understandable. That's basically what Fillory is. And he is like, they sort of convince him that maybe he should listen to Quentin, even though it sounds like a bunch of bullshit, because it's not like he can control that he went there, and it could happen again. And forewarned is forearmed. And if there's information that Quentin knows that could help him, he should take it. What's the harm? But then as soon as he starts to ask practical questions about what to do if this beast comes at him again, Quentin has nothing to offer, because it turns out this thing is not in Fillory in the books. And so Quentin's just kind of like, Penny is just like, oh, all right, well then you're no help to me at all. Like I was saying, bye-bye. And he takes off, and it leaves Quentin sitting there with this like realization that the world he has always felt he knew so well might actually be not at all like he thought. And it's an interesting sort of like, because he's saying that he's devastated by it. And I'm really like wondering how many of us have something that we could say that about. Because it's so, it could be, this experience, really easily transferred to a practical everyday situation. For example, you always wanted to get into a certain like line of work, right? And you focused your whole life on this career and were really obsessed with it. And then you actually get into that work and you realize it isn't at all what you wanted. Nothing is like you thought. I don't know though, because that's such a different, like, that's the sort of thing where it's just, my experience isn't as much fun as I thought, or I'm running into like personalities that I don't like. I feel like if you get really obsessive about a subject like that, when it doesn't meet your expectations, it's not going to be so jarring that it feels like a completely different subject or place. This is like almost to him like home. So the closest that I can compare it to is like, what if you came home and somebody had like moved the rooms in your house around, and how incredibly like weird and upsetting and inexplicable that would feel to you. But you know, it's just hard for me to relate to him on this, and the idea that like he really feels almost betrayed by the fact that Fillory doesn't sound like what he thought it was going to be. And as somebody who has really been very invested in several different like fantastical worlds in books, I don't feel like I would necessarily have this sort of reaction, even if things turned out to be very different, because that's part of it, is that these stories are all full of surprises and full of little things that like folks didn't really know were coming, even within the context of the book. So I don't know. Or maybe like I'd get dropped into Harry Potter and it turns out like the teachers are way meaner and stricter, and like, you know, something that's got, but there's like Voldemort in that world, you know, I don't know. So anyway, he's just really, really struggling with that and doesn't like respond well. Alice says something like, I bet these got you through a lot of your childhood. And he sort of smirks at her like really sadly and is like, yeah, my childhood. Like, it's obviously still really a thing for him. And the fact that everybody is assuming he left this behind a little once he grew up, and that isn't true, is like simultaneously infuriating to have to explain, and also really like embarrassing because nobody really seems to understand it. Melanie says, I felt a parallel in that to learning that different writers or actors you loved are actually terrible people, and the difficulty in separating the work or the inability to separate, breaking the illusion of childhood. Ooh, that's a good point. I like that, Melanie. That feels a lot more like, as you said, breaking the illusion of childhood, realizing that like there are no perfect people out there. Even there are times where you'll have like somebody who's been writing something and you feel like you've gotten to know the characters, and then they'll write the character doing something that you feel is totally out of character, and you're like, what the fuck? But when it's a real person like this, I feel like that's a better description, is somebody who's actually out there creating and in the world. So yeah, I like that. Ashley just wrote, did you put your name in the goblet of fire? Girl, don't get me started. So then we go to Julia, and she is busting into this bar that this kid Rick works at and harassing him about getting some of these spells. Now, guys, I have such mixed feelings about Julia. It's the kind of storyline that I suspect everybody on social media wanted her to like be murdered and taken off the show. I really get the vibe from what I'm generally hearing from people. And I mean this like, you know, even on the post in the main group, somebody was like, her storyline is garbage, but whatever. This is the sort of thing that makes me instinctively want to sort of like stand up for her, because I want the female main character to have a little bit more going on than it seems like she does. All I'm getting from her right now is this like desperation. And that desperation is escalating now into violent reactions that are like, she's coming into this guy's job and sort of harassing him. She breaks a bunch of glasses and tells him that like she isn't done with him and consider this a warning. The whole thing is really aggressive in a way that's like, I actually feel like it's done well. Actually, it's sort of, she doesn't know this guy real well, first of all. And I always feel like when you're starting to feel this sort of desperation or anger or this injustice, which is what she definitely sees this as, and you have the chance to take your aggravation out on somebody that you don't know at all, you're going to take it because it's better than hurting people that you actually give a shit about. So her sort of like snapping on this dude, especially because he's real like reedy and weak looking and doesn't have any sort of like, there's no physical threat coming from him, you know? It's making sense that she is just taking her anger out. However, the way that she is reacting to everything is really, to me, indicating that she could easily go down the same road that Marina has gone down. Whatever happened to cause Marina to get kicked out of school, I want to say if Julia had been admitted to Brakebills that she would not have wound up doing that. But really, that's irrelevant because if you turn into a whole other type of person because certain things just don't go your way, then who you are isn't really that firm a thing. There's not a lot of principle backing who you are. Because regardless of your circumstances in life, and I mean this not like vastly different circumstances, being born to, you know, wealth versus born to poverty, of course those are going to shape you into a totally different person. But I'm talking about you are an adult and then other things begin to happen to you. I feel like if things change you into somebody who is starting to get cruel, that's been in you. Like, that's going to be something that you have to deal with either way. And if she had gotten into Brakebills and didn't start to go down this road then because she was being taught and things were working out for her, I feel like this sort of behavior would surface eventually for some reason. Does that make sense? So it's just sort of accelerated right now because she is getting frustrated and turned down by so many people. And she is really a person who is used to things working out for her because she is talented, works hard, and just tends to be like somebody who's an overachiever. So being foiled like this specifically when she's always gotten her way on stuff is just, she is not coping with it well at all. And this kid, he finally like chases her out and he gives her some spells. I think maybe he just gives her the one, actually. And he was just like, or maybe he gives her a couple. But he says that these work, you know, just try them, but please don't come back here again. And it becomes really clear that everybody in this town knows Marina and is afraid of her. And nobody wants to be on the receiving end of her wrath if they find out that that Julia has been helped by any of them. So, yeah, he says no one wants a war. And he gives her that one. Oh, yeah. It's about an hour by train. Went there a couple years back. They're real. They're good. Give them a try. But don't come back here again. That's right. So it wasn't a spell. That was a whole other thing. The spells she gets from this woman who starts following her, which we wind up finding out is Katie's mom. And Katie's mom, we don't get details on precisely what happened here. But the overall story is that her mother wanted to like do some sort of heist. And we don't know for what. She was working with Marina, I think, but it could just be that she was doing this independently and then went to Marina for help once shit started to go wrong. It's not clear yet. But she did this thing. 2 people got killed during this heist. And she had to go to Marina for help with getting everything smoothed over and cleaned up. And in exchange for this service, Marina is demanding basically unlimited work from her daughter, stealing shit. And there is no end date in sight. There is no contract to get out of. There is no... This is a permanent indenture, basically, which I want more details so much, but she says something like, you sold your daughter. And this makes me think, because when this story started, I sort of thought that her daughter volunteered herself and then like wound up finding out that she wasn't that there was not going to be an end to this. Like, she volunteered thinking she was going to do 1 or 2 jobs to help Marina out, and then came to find out, no, this is a permanent thing you're going to be doing for me forever. But the way she's saying you sold your daughter sounds like she volunteered her kid to do this. And Katie's just continuing to do it because if she doesn't, something is going to happen to her mother. And that guilt, like, she can't, it's the sort of, this is one of those things that it's the worst, because you can be so angry with somebody and so resentful and so hurt as well. But the only way to really, like, say fuck you is to not do the thing. And then that results in real harm coming to that person. So your hands are completely tied. And the best you can do is to just, like, cut them out of your life, which is what Katie winds up doing. Like, I really feel for her, because when she comes in, she says something about how, like, because her mom's like, oh, I want to give you something. And she says, my birthday was 7 months ago. And her mother's like, I was in a really bad place at that time. And if any of you have had dealings with friends, family who have addiction issues, and that's what it's sort of being framed as in the context of this story, people who are not just, like, a screw up, somebody who's like, oh, I have this business idea and it's obviously, like, never going to work, but they drop all of their savings into it. But somebody who seems like they are, especially something like a gambling addiction, I feel like, because it's different when it's an addiction that is physically harming you. Something that's got something like a drug or alcohol or something, where you're also watching this person sort of disintegrate in front of you, and they're suffering their own type of consequences as well that are completely separated from any financial or, like, social issues. Like, not that those don't also go hand in hand with that kind of addiction, don't get me wrong, but there is something about this that really does sound like a sort of a gambling addiction to me. Like, there's a desire to, like, get something quickly and easily without having to put in work for it. But there's also, like, the rush that comes from it. There's also this, like, getting off on the uncertainty of it. And when she says, I was just in a really bad place, it's the sort of thing that, like, a lot of people will say to excuse mistreating people in their lives. And it is not invalid, like, in general, saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I was in a bad place, I didn't do as well as I could have done. But she doesn't go to her daughter to make amends. That's not what this feels like. When you go to somebody and you're like, I didn't do as well as I wanted to, I'm sorry for letting you down, and that's all you're here for, is to apologize. That has a whole different vibe to it than inviting them to meet your partner, talking about how you, like, are going to need their help with starting a new house. And, like, generally this has the feel of, I want something from you, but I'm going to phrase it and frame the whole concept of it to make it sound like it's also beneficial to you too. It feels like a con. And Katie's not stupid, and she's clearly gotten enough of this sort of shit from her mother before that she recognizes what's going on right away. And basically is just like, you know what? I'm out of here, and gets up and leaves and takes the spell with her that they were going to use to hide their house. It was supposed to be a spell that would make a house practically invisible, is what they're saying. And when Julia understandably is like, no, why are you taking that? Her mother says something like, well, she needs it too. And this drives me really batty right here, guys. Okay. We live in a society where you can make copies of literally everything instantly and upload them to clouds, and they're available to you on all of your devices and other people's devices potentially anywhere in the world. But this bitch takes this one piece of paper and walks off with it, and that's supposed to be just the end of the spell for them. Oh, we don't have it anymore. Is there some, like, other bit of fine print that I don't know about that means if you hand this over to somebody, you can't use it anymore? Or that more than one person cannot have a spell? Because that feels untrue based on the fact that they're teaching everybody the same spells at Brakebills out of books. Like, Jessie says she even showed Julia a picture of a spell at one point. Exactly. Like, that's my issue, is that you have these tools and everyone's sort of pretending that they don't have them until the show feels like making it interesting to us. Oh, look, we can combine technology and spells. She's got spells on her phone. Isn't that wild? We're in the 21st century. But then there's things like this where it's just a scrap of paper and we act like it's fucking literally being stolen forever. And that just doesn't make any goddamn sense to me. Just pull out your phone, take a photo of the paper, and then let her take the paper with her. Go ahead. It's fine. It'll take you a second to do. And it's just like, this keeps coming up. This sort of idea of like taking spells or having access to spells. And it feels like an interesting device in some ways. Like it's a recipe and you want to get the exact one. And in that way, I like it. But they can't be messing around with them having spells on their phones and being able to use phones at all. And then try and act like we're also going to pretend this is the only copy. Like when Julia shares that spell with her and is like, they don't have stuff like this at Brakebills. My first question is, where did you get it from? And if I missed that, forgive me. But second question is, you got it from there, then get it again. Go back and get it again. Why can't you just do that either? Like, there's just, it feels like a plot device, but it's not even a plot device that's like constructed well. It's just, it's because there's a lot of stuff like this that I can sort of hand wave and be like, that doesn't really make sense, but okay. And let it go because it happened the one time and it just needed to. And it was a good shorthand for something, you know. This is something that is coming up over and over again. They're building entire plots around the fact that there are spells hidden in somebody's file cabinet on pieces of paper. I mean, does that seem like why would they be in there? Why would she keep them that way when we have what we have at our disposal? Is it just because it's more interesting to try and get physical objects out of physical spaces than it is to try and like hack into somebody's system? I guess. But then find a way to make it so that having these spells on the internet at all is really dangerous. Explain that to me. Make it something that's like just not an option for whatever reason, or something that you can only do really rarely, or something that you can only do with certain kinds of spells. Like have there be a reason behind why doing this the way that most of us handle everything in our lives in this day and age is simply not an option for them. And then you can do this sort of thing. And I might still kind of side-eye it, but I'll at least have, you know, some canon supporting the whole thing. But as of right now, this weirdness with just like handing somebody a piece of paper, and it looks like Katie hands it to Marina and doesn't keep it. I am hoping that at least Katie is like taking snapshots of the shit that she steals. I don't know if there's any way to like get caught because of that. Does Marina have access to Katie's, you know, iPhone password? Can she get in there? But I hope that Katie is doing something to sort of back up all of the work that she has been doing for Marina to get something out of it herself. Melanie says, same with the spells on the phone. Is that it? We can get more. Can they only be used once? Now, see, my theory on that, Melanie, isn't that they can't be used again, but that it's like not exciting for them once they have like finished a spell to go back and do it again. It's sort of like a crossword puzzle is the vibe that I get, where you can erase it and do it all over again, but you just finished it, and why would you do that? They want progressively more and more challenging stuff, and and they want it to be new. And I don't really get the way that things go with the memory, because it seems like they're working from written spells most of the time. And are there spells that they just, like, once they've memorized it, it's just in their head and they don't need it written at all anymore? The way that I can be with certain recipes, I don't even need to, like, go check it. I just am like, oh yeah, no, that was a pound of flour or a pound of sugar and 2 pounds of butter, you know, that kind of thing. I assume they work like spell scrolls in D&D, but there sure could have been an explainer in there. I don't know what that means, Michael. I'm sorry. You'll have to tell me about what scroll spells work like. Maybe with the hand diagrams for finger movements and such, it makes it hard or takes a while to transfer to a computer from a drawing on a page. You just take a photo, though. You know? If it's that deep where you're going to be doing, like, then don't just take a photo for right now. Just have a backup. I mean, there's also a ton of what do you call it? Tools for drawing and using a tablet or a touchpad, trackpad, and drawing, and like, it's just the sort of thing that if I have people who are doing like graphic design in my life, and they can be whipping up new cartoons and shit every couple days, you can't act like drawing a spell is going to be that much more impossible. There just needs to be like some sort of anything. Give us something. He says, sorry, they're one-time use and can't easily be copied. Maybe there's a magical copy protection on the paper. Maybe, again, I wish they would tell us. Like, all of these things that we're saying in our 2 seconds of rapping back and forth about what could be the problem would all make sense if they told us that. But they don't get into it at all. So there are these moments like this where I'm supposed to be like, oh my God, she took the spell and Julia's real mad. But I can't even decide whether I should even be mad if that's a big deal or not, because I feel like you should be able to just go get it again. Anyway, I'm sorry to get hung up on that, but because this whole thing circulates around getting that file cabinet, it feels like they need to have done more in that department. So I'm just going to jump ahead to that, because Katie's mom, she follows Julia, even though Julia basically is like, you are trash for what you did. You had bad judgment, and there is somebody still paying for the shit that you did. And I am not interested in working with you because Marina already like has a bead on you, basically. Like, this puts their whole idea at risk here because of how it all hinges around a continuing relationship with Marina. It's not like Marina cast me out and I have never seen her again. It's Katie, my daughter, is still under her thumb, and she is using hurting me as leverage, right? So yeah, the whole thing is just understandable to me that Julia is like, I am not risking this. Like, you just have too much of her attention on you right now. And I'm very, very curious later on exactly how this works. But her mother shows up at the safe house that Julia has gotten for herself, which I want to know a little bit more about that also, where she got this place. But she's casting the spell that is meant to zero in on this file cabinet and transport it to where she is. And she's trying to cast the spell alone, but it's a spell that really needs 2 people. And so Katie's mom busts in and is just like, listen, I took your wards down because that's how easy that was. And you need 10 extra fingers to be able to do this properly. You were going to hurt yourself right there. So Julia seems to really like, even though she's resistant, she's like, yeah, all right, you're right though. and she allows her to help her. And they get this file cabinet, and it's a really weird scene because I don't feel like they ever said precisely what this spell was supposed to do. So you just have to kind of watch what's going on. And even in like previously ons that they have at the beginning of the episode, you get a tiny like fragment of Pete saying they're in her file cabinet after Julia's like, where are the spells? I want the spells. And it's such a short thing that immediately is overtaken by somebody else, their soundbite, that it is really, really easy to miss what they're even going after and why. But the file cabinet starts shaking, and Marina like is watching it, but she's not doing anything to stop it. She just looks really angry, but there's no reaction coming from her. She's not trying to cast a spell to hold it in place, which I found really strange. Did anybody else think that was weird? Like, she's just, I mean, I guess the whole thing is supposed to be she knows that her spells aren't actually in there and that there's nothing to worry about. But she looks so enraged at this that I was like, it's weird that she would be this angry, but also choose to do nothing. Especially if the booby trap was set specifically to make this happen to people who tried to steal from her. I feel like this reaction of rage wouldn't be so... I feel like this was done to trick the listener, or the viewer, sorry. But if you were Marina and you knew that whoever was about to open this was about to die one of the most gruesome, bloody deaths ever, you would be smirking. You wouldn't be enraged. You wouldn't be like, it would be sort of a like, you really think you're getting something, don't you? All right, go ahead and take the fucking filing cabinet. You know what I mean? And I guess we're just not supposed to know that's coming. So they've had her react in a way that I felt was a little like off. Anyway, so she gets this file cabinet, like it appears to sort of drop through the ceiling and crash down onto the ground in front of them, which I really like that. It doesn't just appear. There's no like easy sort of materialization from nothing. It is a very physical, like somebody just had it on a crane and abruptly like let go. And they open the file cabinet, and the key here is that Julia doesn't open the drawer and she doesn't pull the papers out. And that's why I think what happens to Katie's mother is what just doesn't touch Julia. But she pulls it out. She pulls the papers out. Everything is blank until they get to a page that just says "nice try" with a little heart next to it. And she looks over at Julia, and it is real creepy, guys. Like, there's some blood that has already dripped out of what you would assume is like probably her nose or something. And then when she looks up at Julia, her eyes are bloody, like the whites of her eyes. There's blood coming out like she's crying blood, and from her nose as well. And then she starts to shake and she collapses, and blood begins pouring out of her mouth, off of her head. And there, I mean, the amount of blood, and it's really dark also. It's not like, there's something about the blood being almost black that makes it feel realer. And I don't know why that is, or if that's at all true, but it has the vibe to me of a giant, like, crushing hand that has wrapped around her head and is slowly like crushing her brain. And the way that she's shaking also sort of makes me feel like it's like her spine, you know, something that has to do with her nervous system being triggered. It is truly horrifying. Like, I was watching this the first time around. I just had my hands over my mouth. I was just like, oh my God. And I feel like it's really important to keep in mind, this is the first time Julia has ever seen magic really gone awry. She has had some shit where she's like burned herself trying to do spells with fire and shit. She's, you know, tried some things that just haven't worked. But this is the first encounter with something that is really like evil. Something that can really fuck you up and is done on purpose. And what somebody can do to another person if they really want to do it. And the kind of like will that has to be behind it to accomplish it at all. I always think of in the Dresden Files, Harry thinks about how magic has to come from what you believe. And you have to believe that what you are about to do should be done with all your parts, or else the magic won't work. So, you know, if I were, for example, trying to use this spell on somebody, I feel like I would get to the point where their eyes started to get bloody, and then I'd be like, okay, no, I can't do this. Depending on the situation. I don't know, maybe. But if you are able to continue going until somebody is like basically having a seizure in a pool of blood, and then they just stop moving, and you really believe as you're doing it that this is the right thing to do, you are a person that needs to be away from society. You are not somebody like, I think Julia thought Marina was a bully and maybe even a diva, but I don't think she really got it, what Marina could do or was willing to do. And you would think that she, like, having seen what happened to Quentin with the spell that she helped put on him, that would have given her an idea of who Marina actually is, because Marina was willing to leave him in there permanently, which is the worst thing I've ever heard. But I think Julia put some distance between that spell and her opinion of it because of her own involvement in it. And so she doesn't want to really look at how terrible that was. And this is like a whole other can of worms that's been opened that she just wasn't ready for. And I mean, it's funny because when you think about what's going on at Brakebills and the beast coming in and ripping out somebody's eyes and how fucking brutal that is on the like first day practically that Quentin was in school, that I'm not even sure is as terrible as this. I feel like even at Brakebills, where they're dealing with magic every single day, I don't know that I feel like they would be ready for this either. I feel like Julia just got a real crash course all of a sudden in how bad it can actually get. But, you know, I say that, but then Quentin did kill a puppy. So, But anyway, I just find it really interesting that this is like this is as big a disaster as she's going to come across without her own, like, self being hurt. And I wonder if this is going to change anything for her in the way that she views Marina, in the way that she's deciding to go about trying to get spells and information. I really can't, I don't have a good enough handle on who Julia is to make any sort of prediction about how she is going to react to this, other than running home and crying and being traumatized, which, you know, you would be. But after that, is she going to go into hiding? Because I imagine that's like the smart thing to do at this point. Marina has to know Julia was involved. And because Julia was demanding from Pete on camera that she wanted these spells. Like, there's the bodega camera in there, and it even goes to that POV a couple of times of the camera. So she has to be completely aware that Julia was going to try and come after her shit. Pete has been to Julia's place a couple of times, so they know where she lives. And I'm just like, Julia, you need to pack up and get the fuck out. Like, you really do need to get the fuck out. But I don't know if she's going to think things through enough to do that. Or maybe she won't go home at all. You know, maybe, which would be really the smarter thing to do, is to not go home. But then what? Then what? You know, where do you go? She has the address for that one place that kid from the bar gave her. But I wouldn't want to put anybody else in danger. I would be hiding by myself, because I'm figuring, I'm going to call these like other crews covens. I'm figuring that any other coven I go to, Marina's going to have her eye on already, you know? So anyway, I'm just wondering how that's going to work out. So the thing that's going on that's like the main talk of this chapter is, or the chapter, this episode, is the trials. And this is what's going on at Brakebills right now. Quentin is reading and he's alone in the house, which is totally unbelievable right out of the gate that he's alone in this huge ass house and there's not another soul around. But he gets jumped and dragged out, and it turns out that there is this hazing ritual, basically, except that it's sanctioned. This is not something that's going on with like a frat that's trying to, like, you know, bully you in order for you to join. This is to pass into the next phase of learning at Brakebills, which is really kind of nuts that this is something that, like, because at one point Margot is talking about it with Alice and she says you will pass or fail as the dean built it. And the fact that the dean put these like exercises in place is and has decided to handle it the way that he is, with this like really silly ritual and fucking torchlight and all of this shit being incredibly over dramatic, golden masks and this whole like eyes wide shut sort of thing going on. I just find it really strange. And what's funny is that when we pull the camera back, there are a lot of first years. Like, it looks like there's about 30 of them. And yet our crew, who are all in different houses, are still like working together. Or at least sort of. The only one who's not is Penny, but then Quentin hasn't been sorted yet. But they always wind up working together for whatever reason. Which, you know, I mean, like, that's the conceit of the show, is that these people always wind up working together. That's fine. But there were times when I would forget that there were other students. And then I'd have to be reminded, like when they have somebody that's not part of their group in with him and Penny in the first trial. And you're just like, who are you again? And then it turns out you don't need to know because he's gone. So the trials test your ability to think and act like a magician. And if you pass, your journey begins. If you fail, you flunk out. So they start their first task, and it is being done in the middle of the night, and they have to have the spell set and ready to go by 9 a.m. And Elliot is very quick to let them know that this is almost impossible to do. He says it's practically impossible. Good luck. And every time that Elliot appears throughout this episode, I feel like he's like channeling Amadeus. Do you guys, because there's this like giggle that he has, and in Amadeus, Mozart's laugh is like, oh! It's like this sort really high pitched giggly, like a laugh that makes everybody in the room sort of stop and look over like, what is going on over there? And that's how Elliot keeps laughing. Plus, a couple of times he's got this like frock coat on that is also very reminiscent. And he's like got the whole spread with like the tea sandwiches and everything. Him and Margot are enjoying this way too much. I also would like to know why him and Margot are the ones that are in charge, because I thought that there were more upperclassmen than the two of them, but it seems like they're the only ones that are ever involved with anything. But maybe they're just the ones that are involved with like assigning things to this particular group. Maybe all of the upperclassmen get to split up the first years into groups and choose who they want to be like overseeing. So it turns out as they get nearer and nearer to 9 a.m. that they're not figuring this out. And they are starting to really panic and think that they're going to get kicked out. But it turns out that Quentin believes the whole point of this is that they are supposed to cheat. They are supposed to think like a magician, which means do whatever's necessary and use magic to figure it out if you have to. Use magic to cheat if you have to. That's what magic is there for, basically, is that it is a cheat. And they are him and Penny are pretty much immediately like, yep, this makes sense actually. Okay, let's do that. But this other kid does not want to take any part in the cheating. He feels like that's guaranteed to get them kicked out. So once Elliot comes around and tests their answers and it works, he says something like, well, it's too bad that I know you cheated. And they get this expression like, fuck, are we going to get kicked out? But then he says, nicely done. Congratulations. And they ask about, well, what about, and they turn to look at their partner, and their partner is gone. So like, he was part of their group and their group passed, but the fact that he was not willing to cheat and do the thing, that kicked him out. I feel real bad for that kid. Can I just say? Like, I just really do. And I don't know what I would have done if I were in Penny's place. If I were in Quentin's place and it was my idea and I was suddenly like, oh my God, they want us to cheat, I'd be doubting myself, but I'd probably go ahead and do it. If I were in a group with somebody else who comes up with that idea, I don't know. I think it would just have to be like the 11th hour. I would have to be like, it's either cheat and get kicked out for cheating or get kicked out for not solving it. I'm getting kicked out either way, so I may as well, But I don't know. I don't know what I would have done in this situation. And the way that they cheat is so funny because they figure out that Alice is probably the one who knows how to do this. And Penny uses his astral projection to stand behind Alice and copy her information. And she can tell there's somebody, like, she keeps looking over her shoulder, like she can feel the presence of somebody near her, but she can't see him at all. And I find that really, like, disconcerting because I always have that feeling. Like, not a lot in this house, actually. It happens somewhat rarely. But I have lived in houses before where I always felt like there was somebody in the room with me, and it was really, really, like, unsettling. And to see here that she's having that reaction and there is somebody right there, it's just like, don't make me think that there's really something, show. And I'm wondering, because I had assumed the first watch that Katie was in Alice's group, and that because Alice solved it, that was part of why Katie was also still here. But he says that this is practically impossible, and then it seems like almost everybody makes it through that first round. So I would have loved to see how they wound up solving it. If they also cheated, or if they just figured it out, or what. So the next, they finish that round, they pass on, and then we have this scene between Margot and Quentin. And of course, I'm really feeling like something else is going on in this scene because Margot is being way too nice to Quentin for way too long. Margot I don't think she's a bad person who's never nice to anybody, but she's not somebody who is able to sustain just the niceness without any sort of snark added to it to leaven things for more than 10, 15 minutes. And she keeps us going for a little while. And there's the way that she's reacting to his, because he says something about Fillory and that Penny actually went there. And at first she's just like, get the fuck out of here. And when she tells him, I loved those books, he sort of rolls his eyes and is like, sure you did. Which is just one of those things that makes me crazy because dudes love to act like they have sole ownership of these sorts of things. So somebody like Margot, especially, whom has a sort of like hyper feminine vibe to her, and also has a sort of like flighty vibe, even though that she's not. We know that she's really smart. She wouldn't still be here if she weren't. There is this like instinctual, oh, you don't love it the way I loved it, sort of thing. It's the gatekeeping. And she like says, I used to pretend I was ambassador to the Fillorian Outer Islands. And I, in this moment, was so Like, why didn't you talk to him about this before, Margot? You know how self-conscious he is about it. But at the same time, like, that's not her responsibility to make him feel better about it. And he explains how everything is different over there than what he thought, and how it's just like really fucking him up to know that. And she essentially is like, you know, you're getting yourself all twisted around about a place that Penny only like went to by accident, that you're never going to be able to get to more than likely, and that does not concern you. Why don't you focus on what's going on right now and where you are and try and have a good time? And he takes a swig of the drink that she brought him, and it turns out that she roofied him, and he goes down. And I just want to know why they couldn't have just enchanted him. Like, and what's funny to me is that wouldn't really be better. Like, if it's a magic roofie or an actual roofie, both of those are invading somebody else's like consent and bodily autonomy, right? Like, you're forcing them into a state where you bring them somewhere and to do a thing that they did not agree to, that they don't like. Both of them, but for some reason, which I'm assuming is probably like societal baggage, her using an actual roofie on him, I was just like, oh, guys, why? Just put a spell on him. Don't do this. That's going to fuck him up. Roofies can really like fuck up your system, you know, beyond just what can happen to you while you're unconscious. It will have lasting effects. So I just was like watching this like, I hate it. And he wakes up and he's in this like sort of mysterious forest with Elliot, who is dining on cucumber sandwiches with too much dill in them. And Elliot explains to him, yeah, no, you can't do magic here. I'm going to need you to catch that fish. Here's a bow and arrow. And I'm like, wait, what now? And then, like the brainiac he is, Penny starts to put together that each of them has been given a tool that does not make any goddamn sense for this task that they have been assigned. Because he is supposed to catch a horse, and he has a fucking axe. And it's just, none of this is like making any sense. So, and he runs into Katie, who is really freaking out. She's just kind of, you know, this whole meeting with her mother is reminding her what's on the line, and that she needs to stay in Brakebills so that she has access to all of this stuff that she can steal. So he's just like, all right, we need to find everybody else. And what this all turns out to be is that they need to work together and share their tools and their knowledge in order to each accomplish a task that's best suited to what they are individually able to do. And for some reason, they are being overseen by Elliot and Margot, who are sitting with full, like, their hair done. Her makeup is, like, serious. And this snowy linen tablecloth with crystal china, like, all of this is so over the top. So once they put their heads together, they realize that each of them has something that they can do. Quentin went to junior cowboy camp, so he takes the rope in order to catch the horse. Katie says that she had to get a pheasant, so Alice picks up the bow and arrow. And the fish, we have the net that Katie had been given, and that's taken by Penny. And Katie has to take down a tree, and she has an axe. So I would like to just really quickly point out how long it would take to chop down a tree with an axe. Like, I know that's how it's been done before we had power tools and whatnot. But god damn if that isn't insane. Like, that amount of work, they would have been there for another 2 days, right? Like, good God. But anyway, so they managed to do it all. And Margot and Elliot appear and tell them that we're going to need you to use that tree that you cut down to build a fire and cook us some pheasant and some salmon, and then each of you is going to take turns blowing the horse. And then they both start laughing, and they do a spell. And it turns out that they're right in the backyard of the house that they've all been staying in. They're right there. And everybody is, understandably, rather irritated, while Elliot and Margot just fucking cackle to each other. And he's even got like blush on, I think. Like the whole King Louis is really a look. So then they move on to the final one. And this is the one where you are not going to be able to trick your way into solving this. You have to tell the truth, a real truth about who you are. He says your highest governing, he says, let's see, you must bear yourself in the presence of another magical adept and expose your highest governing internal circumstance. Basically, what he's saying is, what's your motivation? Like, as a person, you know? And Penny confesses to Katie that he's falling in love with her, which flips her out because she knows she has been lying to him this whole time. And she obviously cares about him, and the idea that he is falling in love with her when she hasn't been honest about almost anything, she is feeling way too much guilt. She can't deal with it. And once she says that, her ropes fall off as well. And they both start to have these like movements and look like they're in pain. But then we cut over to Quentin and Alice. And they are counting down together because they haven't been able to get their ropes off. Neither of them is really being honest enough with each other. And so they're pretty much assuming at this point that they are getting kicked out. Like there is no way that they're going to be able to work this spell. So they're counting down the seconds until the bell tolls and the time is up. And because they are both so sure that it's over for them, and that there is nothing to lose at this point, they finally tell the truth. And Alice fucking killed me, y'all. Oh my God. I don't know how many of y'all like listened to my episode on Red Sister, which I did yesterday. But there's a moment where the main character is remembering as a little girl the moment that she asked someone to teach her how to juggle, and she did it so well on her first try that they got angry and thought that she was like fucking with them, basically. They thought that she was lying about never having done it before in order to make them look like an idiot, when the truth was she was just very, very good at that sort of thing right out of the gate. And not that I have that kind of thing, but I have definitely been somebody who realized friends of mine, or people who I thought were friends of mine, were very resentful of the fact that I was better at certain things than they were. And they finally did come out and say so to my face, and basically were like, I really am done supporting you because you wind up on top all the time. So why should I? And that had a huge effect on me and made me feel like I needed to tone it down, or else people wouldn't like me. People would not want to be my friend. And it has been a lot of work to come out on the other side of that and start to realize that you're not going to be friends with everybody. And if somebody can't handle you when you are doing your best, they can't handle you. And that person is not meant to be your friend. But it is when you're just like still finding your place in the world, discovering that being good at things, when you thought that would impress people and make them want to be your friend, actually has the opposite effect at times, is really a hard thing to like wrap your head around. And Alice is saying, I always hold back. I have no idea what I'm actually capable of because I am trying so hard to just look like a fucking normal person that I never let loose. I never have. So I have no idea what that's even like for me. And then Quentin, and this is the one I said at the beginning I wanted y'all's opinion on. He says that he's always running away. And he used to tell himself that it was because he never fit anywhere, but now he's in a school with literal magic and fits better than he ever has. He's around other people who have read Fillory and loved it. He is, he is around somebody today for half of his trials who actually went to Fillory, and yet it's not enough. He's still trying to run away. And I guess he's saying that because he is desperate and he thinks it's too late. But I'm wondering if he's like sort of telling him, like, in his mind, does he think that he has been holding back because he kind of wants to get kicked out and not make it to the next level? Is that what it is? And in terms of his like trying to run away, I don't see that right now at Brakebills. Like, he's not totally happy, but that's not really the same as running away. And not being totally happy after, like, a monster took your teacher's eyes out right in front of you, and you were an asshole to your friends, so they almost imprisoned you in a mental torture chamber. I feel like that's not really, like, that's understandable. I kind of give him a pass on some of that. This place may be everything that he thought he wanted, but it's also more than that, and it's a lot more dangerous than that. So I'm not really sure that I get what that means for him. And we haven't seen enough of the rest of his life either to know what that means, like what he's run away from. But he checked himself into a mental institution twice, I think he says. And that feels not like running away. That feels like trying to face things. I don't know. So I'd be interested in hearing y'all's interpretation. But at this point, I can't because I have to go. So I'm over time. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for coming. I always appreciate y'all being in the comments and talking about what's going on. And I, need help sometimes with keeping names and plot points straight. So that too. And thank you very much to Nicole for commissioning this episode. And I believe that there is another one coming up at the end of this week. Yeah, there's one on Friday. So stay tuned for that one. And I will be seeing you all again soon. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.